time they kicked you out of the soccer field last night?
12:30.
12:30. That's crazy. Too early. And probably when you got back to the room, you went to bed right away. I went to sleep sometime around midnight last night, and I don't know when, but there was a group of guys marauding in the hallway, and I remember the door opening and a group of guys looking in like they were going to do something, like they were going to terrorize, like you were praying or something. They looked into the dark room, then they shut the door. I was like, oh, thank you. What they were going to do, but I did not want any part of it. Well, hey, it's been great to be with you guys this weekend and to talk a little bit and have a chance to be together. And I have one final confession for you. I've told you some things about my life, you know, just kind of opening up about, you know, eggs and stuff. And I have one final thing to tell you, and it's this: I'm not much of a pet guy. I'm sorry, I know. I don't know that I would have told you this at the beginning because some of you would just stop listening to me. But I figured by this point, I've earned the right. I'm not much of a pet guy. I'm very allergic to cats. And so I don't like cats. Wherever I am, cats find me. If I were to come to your house and you had cats, they would come and sit on my lap because somehow they know that I'm allergic to them. And some dogs, like sort of large, like manly dogs, I could imagine owning. But then there's the whole poop thing. And I watch people on my street walking around there with their dogs, and they're carrying a little bag, and in that bag is poop. And I think, I don't want to walk around with a bag of poop. I just don't. And so we've tried to have other types of animals in my lifetime. When I was a kid, my younger brother had a turtle. He had a pet turtle. And he kept it in a glass case in the room across the hall from me. And that turtle did not like being in that aquarium, that glass. And so what he would do is he would get on the rock and he would climb up on his little two paws. Turtles don't have paws, do they? What do they have? Claws? They get up, and he got up on his hind feet like this, like a turtle standing up, and then gravity would get to him and he'd go plump, and he'd fall down. This is what he would do 24 hours a day. Claw, 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 clump. Claw, 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 clump. And I would be laying in my bed at night listening to this, going, I've got to figure out a way to strangle this turtle. Because he's driving me nuts. And then a couple years ago, I would never choose this, but you know, we have children and they have grandparents. And grandparents like to bestow fun gifts on their grandchildren. And so one year, my father-in-law got tadpoles for the kids. And it came in a box, and it was you know, an aquarium, and you fill it up, and you could send away for the live tadpoles. And you know, then they send you the tadpoles in a bag, and then you can watch them grow to become frogs. Which sounds like a wonderful sort of science learning experiment. They're low maintenance pets. And so, but he sent it for Christmas, and so we had to wait like until it was warm so they could send the tadpoles. So we're waiting for months until it's warm enough to ship tadpoles. Then the tadpoles get to our house, and then you put them in, and then you feed them every day. And like in the span of like 2 months or 3 months, they're supposed to start to grow legs. And then it become like a frog. And I think this particular frog was supposed to be like a transparent skin frog. Somehow they did some sort of crazy science experiment to figure out how to make frogs with transparent skin. I have no idea how that works. And so that's what we did. We signed up for this, and we put it, and we watched it and fed the tadpoles every day. One tadpole died, and then the other tadpole became a perpetual tadpole for like the next year. Never grew into a turtle. I mean,
that makes sense.
I wonder why.
I would expect that.
Never grew into a frog, right? Not a fish either. Never grew into a frog. And then one day, after like a year of waiting for this thing, legs started to grow. Oh, it's finally going to happen after a year of keeping this thing alive. And then it started to grow, and then it became like in the middle stage. It was almost a frog, but not quite. And this was the tadpole that belonged to Graham. Caroline, who's 2 years older than Graham, got really excited, and her friends were over one day. She said, look, it finally is becoming a frog. And so she took it out of the aquarium and held it in her hands. And that little tad frog, whatever it was, decided, this is my chance. And jumped out of her hand, splat on the floor. apparently lived, but I think the shock was too much because she scooped him up real quick and threw him back in, and within a couple hours, he was dead. Years and months of waiting for the tadpole to become a frog dead. Graham was crushed. He was crying, and he was blaming it on his sister. It was awful. It was an awful experience, and it's just a little bitty tadpole. One of the reasons why we don't know cats. I use that because I tell you that story because it's a humorous example of the presence of something in our lives that we don't like. And it's universal and it's everywhere. From a plant that we like and try to water and keep alive, it dies. To a tadpole that we try to keep alive, hoping that it'll grow up to be something else, and it dies. But then more serious incidents of death. Loved ones, friends, our own death that we're scared of. I had my grandparents who, in the absence of a stable family at home with my mom and my dad fighting all the time, my grandparents were the people who I knew that my mom loved me. I never really knew if my dad loved me or not when I was growing up. My grandparents always showed me. They were very important people to me. And just in the last year, both of them passed away. And it was a bad experience. They both lived a long life, but still, it was kind of like, wow, these people who've always been a part of my life, they aren't anymore. They died. And death is a big part of our lives. And what we talked about last night, Jesus dying on the cross, as good as that is, still has the sting of death in it, doesn't it? And as grateful as you might have been for what Christ did for you and for me, there's still the sting of death where you might have walked out of here sad and thought, I'm glad that God loves me that much, but I'm kind of bummed that Jesus died. And what I want to let you know is that the story doesn't end there. Every other story, every other person's life, apart from Christ, ends there. But the great thing about Jesus is that his story doesn't end there. When he finally died on the cross, they took his body down. And they put it in a tomb, in a cave. And they sealed that cave up. And he was in there for Friday night, all day Saturday night. And then on what they call the third day, on Sunday, something happened. He was no longer in that tomb. And some people went to the tomb and he wasn't there, and some people said, we saw him. But others didn't believe him. And then later on, there's an account of Jesus appearing to the apostles, to the disciples, that I want to read to you this morning. It's a great account. It's really cool. This is how it goes. It says, that Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the religious leaders. These were the guys who had spent time with Jesus. These were the people who were most associated with Jesus, and the religious authorities and the Romans had just executed Jesus. And so they thought, well, they're coming for us next. Let's go hide so they don't kill us. Get this, suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. They're in a locked room, hiding away, and Jesus appears before them. Peace be with you, he said. And as he spoke, he showed them the wounds in his hands and in his side. Jesus appears before them and says, look, it's me, guys. It's me. It's really me. See, this is where they put the nail through my hands. This is where they stuck the spear in my side. It's really me. And it says the disciples were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. One of the disciples, Thomas, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, we saw him. He was here. I know that he died on the cross, but he was here in this room, Thomas. But he replied, I won't believe it. And he gets kind of gross here. He says, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands. He wants to see the wounds. and put my fingers in it, and place my hand into the wound in his side. What Thomas is saying is, there's no way. There's no way Jesus was here. He's dead. He's dead. He's never coming back. And I won't believe it until I take my finger and stick it in the wound in his hand and stick my hand in the wound in his side. What he's saying, he's not counting on the fact that he's ever going to have to do that. I know it's gross. And that's what he's counting on. I'm never going to have to do that. That's how sure I am that he's not alive, because if he is, that's what I'm going to do. So the story gets good. 8 days later, the disciples were together again. They were together again, and this time, Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. Then Jesus looked at Thomas, and he's got to be going, uh-oh. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. He even knows what he said. Isn't that amazing? Jesus knows what Thomas wants. He says, you want to put your finger into these holes? That's what it's going to take. You go ahead. They've already crucified me. Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand in the wound of my side. Thomas, don't be faithless any longer, but believe. I'm so glad what happens next. Thomas doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to stick his hands anywhere. Thomas says, my Lord and my God. Becomes a believer right there. Believes that Jesus is alive. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me. Okay, that's the sentence I'm going to tell you right now is maybe one of the most important sentences ever in the English language. In any language. Jesus Christ is alive. Really alive. I don't mean alive in our memories. I don't mean alive in that his principles live on. I don't mean alive in that people still follow him or read about this book. I mean he's alive. He came back from the dead. You go, how in the world did he do that? He's God. Okay? Which is pretty much an advantage in any situation if you think about it. His story does not end with death. His story is the story of life conquering death. Remember what we said before. This relationship is set up. Meant to be in a face-to-face relationship. We turn our backs on God. State of sin. What Jesus Christ allows us to do is to begin a relationship with him again by turning our chairs around and saying, God, I want my life to be different. I want to follow you. You know, there's an interesting thing. You can't have a relationship with somebody who's dead. What I'm proposing to you, what I'm offering to you, what we're offering to you this weekend is a relationship with Jesus Christ, who is alive. Not a religion following a dead religious leader, but a relationship with a Jesus who is alive. My daughter had a friend when she was younger, probably 5. She had a friend. This friend she'd go out and play with this friend all the time, and this friend would show up to dinner, and Caroline would always talk about this friend. And her friend's name was Tree, which was the first indication that something was a little strange. Tree was an imaginary friend. You probably had imaginary friends, and it's something you sort of grow out of after time. And so she would tell stories about Tree. And it was always sort of fun to talk with our 5-year-old daughter about her friend Tree and all the things that they did. And, Tree's coming to dinner tonight. Okay, what is Tree like? A relationship with Jesus is not an imaginary friend. Jesus is very real. He just happens to be invisible right now. What I want to let you know is what we're talking about is a friendship with an invisible friend, not an imaginary friend. And what you do in order to start it is you say, I want to turn my chair around. Jesus, I want to follow you. He can hear you. He heard Thomas. He can hear you. And you say, Jesus, I am sorry. I'm sorry for the ways that I've turned my back on you. I'm sorry for the ways that I have rejected you and the way I've treated others. I am sorry. I did not know. When I heard this message and heard about sin, I knew I was a sinner, but I had no idea that it broke my relationship with God in this way. And I remember hearing about sin, and I thought, whatever that guy says tomorrow, who's a speaker at Young Life Camp, whatever that guy says tomorrow, I'm in. And I heard that Jesus Christ died and made it possible for me to turn my chair around. Man, that was the easiest decision I ever made, the most important decision I ever made. And that day, I said, Jesus, I'm sorry for the ways that I've offended you, for the ways that I have lived. And I want to receive this free gift of life. I want to follow you. I want to give you everything I have, and I want to give you my life. And ever since then, Jesus has changed my life. He made Glenn Cook into somebody who is different. There's a couple of things that our relationship with Jesus does in our lives. The first thing that it does is it frees us from guilt and shame. Without Jesus, we carry around all the sins, all the things that we've done, all the things that we feel guilty and ashamed of. And we have nowhere to take those things. In Jesus, He took those things from us. He died for those things on the cross. When Jesus Christ died, He said, I'm willing to be guilty of everything you've ever done wrong. I will take the rap for everything you've done. And so He's freed us from the guilt and shame. The second thing the relationship with Christ does is it connects us with love forever. When we're little, we think, some of us who are lucky, I don't know that I had this stage. I hope my kids do. You have this stage where you think, my parents are my world. They're everything. They're the source of love for me. And then as you get to be older, you realize even the best parents, that's not enough. It's not enough. And so we start looking for love in other ways, in other places, and we end up looking for it in lots of different ways. Some guys and some girls look for that love in some other person and try to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they get absorbed in that relationship, and they hope that this person will be the one who fulfills the emptiness on the inside. Some of us go after success in sports or academics, and we hope maybe this is the thing that's going to fill the hole in my life, it's going to fill the emptiness. But our experience is time after time, person after person, boyfriend after boyfriend, girlfriend after girlfriend, success after failure after success after failure, we're still left empty. What a relationship with Christ offers is to fill that need for love forever. That we can live with God now and that we can spend eternity with Him. That's something. I'm almost done. The third thing, the last thing I want to talk to you today about, that a relationship with Christ offers, is in this life, right now, purpose, meaning. What is your life supposed to be about? What are you really supposed to do with your life? What am I supposed to do with my life? A relationship with Christ offers you connection to meaning and purpose. You know that He created each of you with a purpose. He knows you. He knows all the gifts and the wonderful things that you have to offer, all the weaknesses that you have. He knows all of those. And He has a purpose for your life. For you to use that, to glorify Him, to be a part of changing the world, for being a part of changing somebody else's life and helping them to find peace and hope in Christ. The greatest example I can point to you today is your Young Life leaders. These are people who have come to know Christ, and they see their life as something beyond themselves. You know, they gave up a weekend. They could be doing anything with this weekend. They could be home sitting in a comfy chair, sitting by the fire, reading a book. They could be doing anything. They're here. You know why? Because they see their life as not something to be lived for themselves, but to live for others in the name of Christ. You can be a part of that. And maybe for you it's to be a Young Life leader someday. Maybe for you it's to become somebody who works in a business and makes money so that other people can go places. Or maybe you're the person who's supposed to go someplace and change somebody's life in a foreign country, or go down to the city and change somebody's life there and help people who are poor figure out how to make something of their lives. Your life can be a part of what God is doing in this world to change it, so that death doesn't have to be the final answer in anyone's life. It's a free gift. It's laid before you. A relationship with Christ, restored the way it was supposed to be, freeing you from guilt and shame, connecting you with love forever, and giving you meaning and purpose for the rest of your life. A couple of final words, and I'm really done. Some of you, this is the first time you've ever heard this, and you're thinking, I don't know, I just started hearing about this on Friday, and I need some time to think about it. Great. Please continue to think about it. Remember the end. Another group of you have heard this before, and you're thinking, I gave my life to Christ a couple years ago, and I really haven't been doing much with it. What are you waiting for? Everything is right here for you. What are you waiting for? Talk to your leader and say, I gave my life to Christ, but I've been screwing around, and I've been living a double life, or whatever it is. I want to get serious. I want to follow Christ. Will you help me? Let me say a prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for the offer of life that you give to us, that you conquer death, that death is not the final answer in our lives, that really there's another option. You've given us the option of life. Lord, help us to choose wisely. Help us to think about what we really want in life and to make decisions. To be honest with ourselves and those around us about what our life is really about, what we really want. Thanks for this opportunity to be together this weekend, to have fun and consider life. I pray this in your name. Amen. All right, Kevin Wilkowski, everybody. Lord, name, stop.